Venezuela, cartels like Tren de Aragua and the Cartel of the Suns have thrived in the shadows, guarded by power and corruption. Their operations stretch across borders, moving drugs and money with ruthless efficiency. But when America's B-2 spirit takes flight, the equation changes. Nearly invisible to radar, the stealth bomber carries the mother of all bombs, built to erase strongholds in seconds. What follows changed the rules of engagement in the hemisphere. Everyone talks about Mexican cartels, the Gulf Cartel, Los Metros, Los Rojos, Sinaloa, Los Chapitos, La Melliza, and of course the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, CJNG. Their names dominate the headlines. Their battles spill across Mexico's streets, and their reach extends deep into the United States. But while the world fixates on Mexico, there's another front in the narco wars that hardly ever makes the news: Venezuela. Venezuela is home to some of the most dangerous and least understood cartels in the hemisphere. Chief among them is Tren de Aragua, the country's most powerful homegrown criminal syndicate. Born in Venezuela's prison system, the group has transformed from a local gang into a multinational criminal enterprise. Human trafficking, extortion, kidnapping, and large-scale drug smuggling are just the beginning. Tren de Aragua has successfully projected its power abroad, spreading tentacles into Colombia, Peru, Chile, and even as far as Spain. And then there's the shadowy network known as the Cartel of the Suns. Unlike Tren de Aragua, this isn't a ragtag army of street enforcers or prison-born killers. The Cartel of the Suns is something far more dangerous. A drug trafficking organization composed of high-ranking Venezuelan officials with deep ties to the military and intelligence services. Its name comes from the sun-shaped insignia worn by Venezuelan generals, many of whom are implicated in running cocaine routes in partnership with Colombian cartels and even foreign terrorist organizations. Investigations over the years have linked its operations to none other than Nicolas Maduro himself, the sitting president of Venezuela. Together, Tren de Aragua and the Cartel of the Suns form a 1-2 punch unlike anything else in Latin America. One cartel rules the streets with brutal violence, while the other enjoys state-level protection and resources. That combination has allowed Venezuela to evolve into a key hub for cocaine trafficking, rivaling even Colombia. But here's where things get even more explosive. Recently, these Venezuelan cartels have been formally designated as international terrorist organizations. This isn't just a label, it changes the entire game. When a group is listed as a terrorist entity, the United States can treat them the same way it treats ISIS or Al-Qaeda. That means not just sanctions and indictments, but military force. Airstrikes, raids, and covert operations all become options on the table. For years, Washington has accused Maduro's government of turning Venezuela into a narco state, but diplomatic constraints kept the response limited to economic measures and covert interdictions at sea. Now, with the terrorist designation, the gloves are off. These cartels are no longer seen as just criminal enterprises. They are treated as threats to U.S. national security, which brings us to the operation you're about to see unfold. Venezuela is about to learn what it means to face the B-2 spirit, America's stealth bomber, a weapon so advanced that even calling it an aircraft doesn't quite do it justice. To the untrained eye, the B-2 looks almost alien, a flying wing with no tail, no vertical stabilizers, and barely a silhouette against the night sky. To radar operators on the ground, it looks like nothing at all. Nicknamed the Beast, the B-2 was built for one purpose: to slip through the most heavily defended airspace on Earth and strike without warning. Its radar-absorbent skin and low observable profile make it virtually invisible to traditional detection systems. Even infrared tracking struggles because the B-2's engines are buried deep inside the fuselage, masking heat signatures and reducing the thermal trail it leaves in the sky. If you think you can find it by pointing sensors into the heavens, you're already too late. And when it arrives with surgical precision. The B-2 Spirit can carry more than 40,000 pounds of ordnance hidden within its internal bays. From GBU-31J dams, GPS-guided bombs, to the massive GBU-57 bunker busters designed to penetrate fortified structures, the aircraft is capable of dismantling an entire drug complex in seconds. This is why the B-2 Spirit is most suitable for the Venezuelan mission. No other aircraft in the arsenal can deliver such power with such discretion. The journey alone is a feat of endurance. From Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, the B-2s launch under the cover of darkness. These aren't short-range sorties. With a maximum range of 11,000 kilometers before refueling, the Spirit is built for global missions. But even so, a Venezuelan strike requires mid-air tankers at carefully chosen points. High above the Atlantic, in a silent rendezvous, KC-135 Stratotankers extend the wings of the beast, topping off its fuel for the long flight south. Inside the cockpit, just 2 crew members control this Leviathan. Sitting side by side, they rely on advanced digital displays and fly-by-wire controls to navigate one of the most sophisticated aircraft ever built. The workload is immense, long hours over open ocean, constant radio silence, every move rehearsed to perfection. Missions like this demand more than skill. They demand stamina, discipline, and the ability to function inside a pressure cooker. As they close in on Venezuelan airspace, the Spirit descends to low altitude, hugging terrain with advanced navigation systems that allow it to fly covertly just above the ground. Venezuelan radar operators, already stretched thin, scan their scopes for any sign of intruders. They find nothing. The beast is already inside. The target, a cartel-run drug production facility nestled deep in the Venezuelan interior, guarded by foot soldiers and protected under the silent watch of the Cartel of the Suns. Intelligence suggests the lab is pushing thousands of kilos of cocaine onto international routes every month. The strike isn't just symbolic. It aimed to cripple a vital artery of the cartel's empire. The Spirit lines up for release. Bomb bay doors open silently against the rush of air. At that moment, Venezuela's most secretive cartel stronghold has no idea that the end is already falling from the sky. With pinpoint GPS guidance, 2 JDMs detach, plummeting through the night before hitting their mark with surgical accuracy. The earth shakes. Fireball after fireball tore through concrete and steel. In less than a minute, what had taken years to build would be reduced to rubble and flame. By the time Venezuelan air defenses scrambled to respond, the beast would already be vanishing back into the night, undetectable, untouchable, and gone. Only the wreckage left behind testifies to its presence. Each B-2 Spirit cost nearly $2 billion, making it one of the most expensive machines ever built. Maintaining it requires another $20 million annually, with teams of engineers dedicated to keeping its stealth skin pristine. It is not a tool used lightly, but when it flies, it carries with it a message. No fortress, no cartel, no narco state is beyond America's reach. This isn't just imagination. It echoes a precedent already carved deep beneath the mountains of Iran at Fordo. Codenamed Operation Midnight Hammer, the strike reads like a story made of steel, night, and careful plans. It was a top-secret precision attack on Iran's nuclear facilities that began overnight. Officials said it was the largest strike using B-2 bombers in history and the longest flight involving the fleet since 2001. The mission moved in silence, with many parts working together so the whole would come down like a single, precise hammer blow. The size of the mission is hard to imagine at first. More than 125 aircraft took part. That number alone makes the event feel huge. The cast included 7 B-2 Spirit stealth bombers that flew from the continental United States shortly after midnight Eastern Time. Those B-2s were refueled multiple times in midair as they flew for 18 hours to reach their targets. Other planes had roles you might not see at first. B-2s used as decoys to draw attention one way, while the real bombers went another. Refueling tankers that kept the long flight alive, fighter escorts that watched for threats, and drones that gave intelligence, surveillance, and target acquisition. Each part was small on its own, but together they made the mission possible. At the center of the attack were the bombs called Massive Ordnance Penetrators, known as MOPs. The mission included the first use of these bombs in combat. Before this, they had only been used in testing. Saying first use carries weight. A weapon moves from the lab into real life. That is a large step. Each MOP measures about 20 feet long, weighs 30,000 pounds, and is capable of penetrating 200 feet deep inside a target before exploding. Those numbers tell a story without need for many extra words. Think of a 20-foot object, longer than a small bus. Think of 30,000 pounds, a weight that belongs to a heavy truck or a small building's worth of material. And think of 200 feet of penetration, deep enough to go through many layers of earth or concrete and reach far inside an underground space. In simple, vivid terms, a MOP is a very long, very heavy tool built to punch through layers that most bombs simply cannot reach. It is not a device meant for a flash in the sky. It is a device made to go down, down, and strike what hides below. Just after 2 a.m. Iran time, the B-2 bombers began dropping 14 MOP bombs in strikes on 2 of Iran's nuclear facilities, the Natanz and Fordo sites. That moment must have felt like the snap of a giant hinge being forced open. In total, 13 B-2 bombers took off around the same time on Saturday morning from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, according to Kane. Of those, 6 B-2s were sent to the Pacific island of Guam as decoys. The other 7, the ones that carried out the strikes, quietly headed east. Those 7 kept little communication to avoid detection. Silence was part of their armor. The human picture is as large as the hardware. Crews flew for many hours, refueling more than once. Planners set up decoys and routes. Pilots and support teams took part in what is, in truth, a long chain of careful choices. Every refueling in midair, every radio silence, and every decoy flight was a link in a chain. Break one link and the mission could change. In the press room at the Pentagon after the attacks, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth spoke in clear, hard words. Iran's nuclear ambitions have been obliterated, he said during a press briefing. That kind of language is absolute and final sounding. It is meant to show that the action had a single, clear aim, and that goal, according to the words given, was reached. And yet the mission's neat lines, craft, bombs, timing, and words also point to the strange mix of modern war. High technology paired with long human hours, prayer-like patience before a strike, and a sudden heavy action in the dark. A bomber that uses stealth seeks to be unseen. A MOP seeks to be unstoppable once it is on a path downward. The mission mixed both stealth and force, the B-2s to slip in unseen, and the MOPs to go deep and smash what was buried. The timing mattered. The B-2s left shortly after midnight Eastern Time. They flew for 18 hours. The bombs fell just after 2 a.m., Iran time. Those hours are lives of their own. The long hum of engines, the quiet work of crews, the dark stretch of a globe passed over. For the people on the ground near the targets, the strikes were a matter of moments. Just before the bombers let loose their loads, 24 submarine-fired cruise missiles were launched toward a third nuclear site inside the country. Those missiles rode low and slow across the water and sky. They were fired first, but because they fly more slowly and had a long trip to make, they did not hit until a little after the heavy bombs from the long-range stealth planes had already fallen. That timing, missiles launched from beneath the waves, then heavy bombers passing overhead, mattered. It was not a random flare of violence. It was a layered strike, a plan of pieces meant to work in order. The submarine shot its missiles to help shape the fight on the ground. The big stealthy bombers carried the largest weapons. Both kinds of weapons moved toward the same kind of target. Hardened, buried facilities built to survive ordinary attacks. The result was a hard hammer of different tools hitting one goal from different angles. On the morning after the strikes, people watched for the machines to return. All 13 of the stealth bombers that had moved in the operation were expected back at their base in Missouri early Sunday afternoon. But not all the planes took the same path. 6 of them had been sent as decoys toward a Pacific island, a move meant to draw eyes the wrong way while the real strike group crept east. Whether those decoys ever touched down on that distant island was not clear. The 7 that carried out the strikes, the ones that flew quietly east and kept radio silence to avoid detection, were the ones that dropped the heaviest bombs. The president spoke to the nation later that night from the White House. He stood with senior leaders behind him and spoke in a voice that meant to close a chapter. A short time ago, the U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the three key nuclear facilities in the Iranian regime, he said. He named the aim, plainly, to destroy the country's ability to enrich uranium and to stop what he called a looming nuclear threat. He declared the strikes a spectacular military success and said the facilities had been completely and totally obliterated. The speech was sharp and simple. It told a story of final, crushing force. Those words were meant to show certainty, but people who watch these things closely know that certainty after a strike is a process, not a single sentence. Officials on the scene said the initial read from the field was that the guided weapons had hit the places they were meant to hit and had the effect the planners wanted. Yet a full picture of damage, especially to underground hardened facilities, takes time. Experts must look at before and after images, signals, and when possible, on-the-ground checks. The immediate claim of destruction is a strong one. The full truth of what was broken or left standing will be known only after patient work. Officials also stressed the careful edge of the plan. They said the operation had been the product of long weeks and months of positioning and preparation so that everything would be in place when the order came. The plan used misdirection, secrecy, and what was called the highest level of operational security. Few people in the capital were told the timing or details. Congressional leaders reportedly learned that the mission had begun only after it was underway. The strike force moved with a small crew in each bomber, 2 people per plane, and those crews flew in and out without detection, according to commanders. Stealth and silence were the armor of the night. One striking note in the day's account was the near lack of response. The defenders on the ground did not launch fighters or surface-to-air missiles as the strike unfolded. Prior to the attack, Allied strikes had reportedly spent days degrading the country's air defense systems, destroying much of the fighter fleet and leaving airfields badly damaged. Those earlier blows did not come from the main strike force that night, but they shaped the battlefield by limiting the target's options. With the sky made quieter by those losses, the bomber crews found fewer threats to dodge and fewer alarms to set off. Commanders emphasized that the mission was aimed at nuclear capability, not at civilians or a change of government. They said no troops or civilian structures were targeted. The message, officials said, was intended to be surgical. Remove the means of a bomb while leaving the larger political map in place. At the same time, leaders said that public and private channels were being used to offer the country a chance to come to the table and negotiate afterward. In other words, the strike was meant to be a hard stop, not an all-out attempt to remake a country. The night's pace also showed how modern war moves beyond the single strike. A submarine beneath the waves launched missiles. Stealth bombers flew long, refueled many times, and dropped heavy ordnance designed for deep-buried targets. Fighters and tankers circled to shield and sustain the mission. Drones watched and fed eyes to those in the sky. Each piece had a job, and each job fit into a chain. Break the chain, and the plan could fail. Troops in the wider region were left in a tense state. Some units were not warned in advance of the attacks. Commanders elevated protection measures across the area, especially at key bases and in nearby states. When a strike this large lands, the ripple of worry and the need for protection spread fast. Forces on the ground prepare for possible reprisals, for accidents, and for the hard work of keeping people and systems safe while leaders sort through the political fallout. Finally, the night reminded everyone that in modern conflict, the line between war and politics grows thin. A president's words, a commander's plan, the silent run of a submarine, and the hush of a bomber's radio all meet in a tight, sharp window. The words used afterward, of obliteration, of prevention, of no intent to change a regime, become part of a story told to the world. Yet that story is not the whole truth. It is a version chosen for now. The quiet after the storm is not empty. Assessments will continue. Images will be analyzed. Leaders will watch for reaction. And the people who live near the broken sites will begin to count the cost. For a few hours on one long night, a vast set of machines and plans converge to strike deep and hard. The immediate act is done. The consequences are only just beginning to unfold. Now, in preparation for a possible attack, the Venezuelan government announced that more than 4.5 million militia members would be prepared, activated and armed to patrol the streets from north to south, east to west. Imagine lines of civilians turned into fighters, neighborhood watch groups flipped into armed units, and whole cities threaded with checkpoints. The plan calls these forces peace squadrons and ties them together with police and military units to guard the capital and patrol local blocks. The promise, nobody will ever touch the nation. The reality, a society rehearsing for conflict. The announcement came after reports that naval warships, including guided missile destroyers, have taken positions near the country's waters and that thousands of foreign troops have been moved into the region. In Washington, leaders have been pressing a campaign to choke off drug trafficking, and they have raised the reward for information leading to the arrest of the country's leader, doubling the bounty to $50 million. At the same time, authorities say they seized more than $700 million in assets tied to the leader's inner circle, private jets, vehicles, and other property. The message from outside was clear. Pressure on the regime would grow, with money, law, and military presence all in play. These events are being spun in stark terms on both sides. The government in the capital called the moves provocative and hostile. It answered by activating the militia and arming local patrols. The leadership's language has been blunt and theatrical. Militia members, prepared, activated, and armed, will march through cities, squadrons will guard neighborhoods, and the entire country will be organized into defensive quadrants. The rhetoric is meant to reassure supporters and to show that the state can mobilize most of its people at a moment's notice. Why such a heavy turn toward arms? The official line from the other side frames it as a law and order operation. Washington says it is going after drug traffickers who move narcotics into the United States and has accused the government of ties to major drug networks. The punishment has taken the form of asset seizures, sanctions, and the large reward for capture. The stated aim to cut down the flow of drugs and to deny those accused of trafficking their safe havens and money. But the posture goes beyond courts and dollars. Tariffs and economic penalties are being used to squeeze outside buyers of the nation's oil and gas. Military assets have been moved into the neighborhood, and a large bounty now hangs like a prize over the leader's head. The combination, law enforcement, economic pain, and ships at sea, reads to many like a pressure campaign that could become a pressure cooker. Inside the country, the politics are raw. The government says it is under attack and that all defenses must be set in motion. It accuses foreign powers of waging a campaign to delegitimize and topple the regime. Outside critics point to a history of disputed elections, a collapsing economy, and a ruling circle accused of enrichment and criminal ties. The capital has not had formal relations with the White House since 2019, and the current bitter standoff has only hardened both sides' view of the other. That deep distrust makes talks harder and threats more dangerous. What does mobilizing 4.5 million people look like on the ground? Picture street corners turned into watch posts, volunteers patrolling with radios and sometimes with weapons, local committees working with the police to keep patrols covered. The peace squadrons promise a mix of forces, police, military, and community groups that will patrol together. In theory, such a mix could help maintain order. In practice, arming so many people risks more violence, more checkpoints, and more friction with neighbors and travelers. Where there are arms and tension, small clashes can spin into bigger incidents. For the wider region, the risk of misstep is real. When ships mass, bounties fly, and governments arm citizens, the chance of a small incident sparking a larger fight grows. A mistaken radar contact, a firefight at a checkpoint, or even an accident at sea can become the spark that sets off wider clashes. Neighbors watch nervously, traders pause, migrant flows may rise again, and the political temperature in capitals around the world spikes as leaders ask, will the crisis move from bluster to an actual military clash? Questions also swirl about the long-term effect of the pressure campaign. Will the stepped-up legal and economic actions push the leadership to change course? Or will they deepen the regime's survival instincts, leading to more repression at home and more alliances with shadowy smuggling networks abroad? When a government is cornered, some rulers harden and cling to power more fiercely. Others make concessions. Which path unfolds depends on a tangle of incentives: the elite's calculations, the army's loyalties, the public's patience, and the reach of outside pressure. Then there is the strange theater of rewards and seizures. A bounty, now at $50 million, turns a political fight into a public hunt. It signals determination and offers a concrete grab for those seeking to turn information into cash. Asset seizures strip financial support and can choke off the means to buy loyalty. But such moves also reverberate through ordinary life. When planes, homes, and bank accounts vanish, businesses pause and people feel the squeeze. Economic pain often hits the poor hardest, even when the stated target is an elite inner circle. Public messaging pushes both sides into simple stories. The government says it is defending sovereignty and resisting a foreign plot. The other side says it is fighting a crime that reaches far beyond borders, using a toolkit of law, money, and military posture. Each narrative finds its audience, and each hardened tale makes compromise harder. In the space between these narratives live millions of people who mostly want safe streets, steady work, and enough food on the table.